Hey. Today I'm going to be reading to you the first chapter of this book, Mothers Who Can't Love, a Healing Guide for Daughters. Can't even say the phrase mother-daughter without gagging just a little bit. But we'll see what we can take from this. All right. Introduction. I was on a business trip to Wisconsin. I had been cooped up inside all day and I wanted to get some air. The sun was out, so at the lunch break, even though it was pretty cold outside, I decided to take a short walk. I looked for the sunniest spot I could find, but it was the damnedest thing. It sure looked like the sun, and it was bright like the sun, but there was absolutely no warmth coming from it. And this wave of sadness came over me. The sun was just like my mother. Okay, starts off strong. Heather, a petite 34-year-old sales rep for a large pharmaceutical company, became teary as she spoke. She was expecting her first child and was frightened that she might be at risk of becoming the same kind of mother she'd had. Heather. This is Heather talking. I hope in therapy. So here goes Heather. For the longest time, I couldn't even think about being a mom myself. I felt so lucky when I met Jim after a series of bad relationships, and I realized that someone could really love me. We've wanted to have a baby for a long time, but I was so afraid there was something wrong with me. Like maybe all the coldness from my mom would start coming out of me once I was pregnant. I couldn't bear the thought that I might ever be that way with my own child. It's a kind of upsetting story I've heard again and again from women who carry with them a legacy of pain, fear, and turmoil because of the profound emotional wounds inflicted by their mothers. In more than 35 years as a therapist working in a variety of clinical settings, I've seen large numbers of women like Heather who, knowingly or unknowingly, are caught in the damaging emotional orbit of the women who brought them up and are struggling to escape. They come to therapy sessions with anxiety and depression, relationship problems, lack of confidence, concerns about their ability to stand up for themselves, or even to love. Some are able to make a connection between their relationship with their mothers and the difficulties in their lives. Others mention, "My mother is driving me crazy," but consider that to be secondary to the issues that bring them to me. Often they're sorting through confusing mixed messages, hoping to prove themselves wrong about the pain they carry from the past. I needed to hear more about the fears Heather was carrying into motherhood, so I asked her to tell me what she meant specifically by the coldness from my mom that she was so afraid of replicating with her own child. She began hesitantly. It was like my mother had two sides. She gave me birthday parties, sometimes she came to events at school. She could even be nice to my friends. But then she had this other side. And what was that like, I asked. Well, she criticized me an awful lot. But to tell you the truth, most of the time she ignored me like I wasn't even worth her time. I don't know, maybe the nice things she did were all for show. But I'll tell you, I sure didn't get to feel safe around her. There was no real bond or kindness. I never felt important to her. I was just something she had to deal with when it suited her. But she was busy. You can't blame a single mom for being distracted. Like so many women, Heather could speak candidly about how she'd been treated. Yet she grasped for ways to minimize the hurt and struggled to see her mother as something she'd rarely been. Loving. Take a sip of coffee there. All right, ladies. What makes a good mother? A good mother is not expected to be perfect and self-sacrificing to the point of martyrdom. She has her own emotional baggage, her own scars, her own needs. She may have work that she doesn't want to compromise, and there may be times when she's not available to her daughter. She may lose her temper and say or do things to her daughter that she regrets. But if her dominant behavior engenders in her daughter a belief in her own value and nourishes her self-respect, confidence, and safety, that mother is doing a good job, whether she's a wonderful mom or just good enough. She's demonstrating real love in a tangible, reliable way to her child. That's not the kind of mothering Heather and so many other women experienced. For them, nourishing love and attention always came drop by drop. Behind closed doors, those intermittent splashes of warmth inevitably gave way to a reality that outsiders rarely saw. Their mothers tore them down, competed with them, icily ignored them, took credit for their achievements, failed to protect them, or even abuse them. But love them? No. Loving is consistent overall behavior, and daughters like Heather were starved for its nurturing warmth. The high cost of missing a mother's love. The effects of growing up this way are painful and wounding. Girls define their emerging womanhood by identifying and bonding with their moms. But when that vital process is distorted, because their mothers are abusive, critical, smothering, depressed, neglectful, or distant, they're left to struggle alone to try to find a solid sense of themselves and their place in the world. It rarely occurs to them that their mothers were not loving, or even, in extreme cases, that they were malevolent. That's too hard to admit, and allowing in that possibility produces acute anxiety in children, whose survival is so closely tied to their vital caretaker. It's far safer for a child to believe that if there's something wrong between us, it's because there's something wrong with me. She makes sense of her mother's hurtful behavior by turning it into self-blame and feelings of inadequacy and badness. Feelings that persist into adulthood no matter how accomplished she is or how much she is loved by others, including her own children. A little girl who is criticized or ignored or abused or stifled by an unloving mother becomes an adult who tells herself she'll never be good enough or lovable enough, never smart or pretty or acceptable enough to deserve success and happiness. Because if you really were worthy of respect and affection, a voice inside whispers, your mother would have given them to you. If you were that little girl, the daughter of a mother who couldn't give you the love you needed so much, it's likely that much like Heather, you now go through your days with a cavernous gap in your confidence, a sense of emptiness and sadness. You're never truly comfortable in your own skin. You may not trust your ability to love, and you can't step fully into your life until you hear that gaping mother wound. Why I'm writing this book now. My session with Heather brought that painful reality home to me once again, and I thought about her long after our session was over. She was intelligent, attractive, and accomplished, yet those qualities seemed largely invisible to her. She doubted her ability to love and be loved, and I'd discover she felt like a fraud, ever fearful that there was something wrong with her, despite all evidence to the contrary. Self-aware as she was, at age 34, she was still waiting for her mother's acknowledgement and blessing to give her confidence, faith in herself as a woman, a partner, a mother. And it would probably never come. Nice. When a strong mother bond is missing, women often struggle for a lifetime with a bewildering sense of loss and a sense of deprivation. I've always specialized in shining a light on the difficult truths of how we really treat one another, beneath the facades of the perfect couple or the happy family. And after writing Toxic Parents, another great read, I assume, I thought I'd said all I had to say about the people who raise us. But as more and more daughters kept bringing their mother wounds to me, I knew I needed to speak woman to woman, to the millions who are grappling with an unloving mother and the soul-deep consequences of having her in their lives. There was another, quite telling, factor in my decision to write this book. Though I had long resolved the turmoil caused by my own mother, until she died, I couldn't give myself permission to write a book focusing on mothers who can't love. My women clients often have had painful relationships with their fathers as well. Fathers who had massive problems of their own and were rarely available for their daughters, since a healthy man usually doesn't marry or stay with an unstable woman. But the jagged relationship with their mothers always seems to be at the emotional core as daughters try to navigate marriages, careers, and motherhood. If you've lived with an unloving mother, her legacy is there every day in the difficulties you face and keep facing in your emotional relationships, and as you try to develop confidence and self-respect. I know you must be frustrated, discouraged, and confused, but I want you to know that we'll work together in this book to find the clarity and relief that have eluded you. I'll guide you step by step in reshaping your relationship with your mother and yourself to heal the wounds that have brought so much pain for so long. Starting now, we'll take a close, honest look at your mother's behavior and the impact it's had on you. As we move through this book, you'll see her patterns and yours in detail. I'll give you effective new strategies for changing the beliefs and behaviors that have held you back. And I'll help you gain an understanding, perhaps for the first time, of what real love from a parent or anyone looks and feels like. That's the powerful, reliable touchstone that will guide you in rebuilding your life. You can't call it love. To help you look objectively at the mothering you've experienced, I've designed the following checklists. First, let's deal with what's going on right now. Does your mother regularly demean or criticize you? Make you a scapegoat? Take credit when things go well and blame you when they go wrong? Treat you as if you're incapable of making your own decisions? Turn on the charm for other people, but turn cold when she's alone with you? Try to upstage you? Flirt with your significant other? Try to live out her life through you? Call, email, text, and schedule herself into your life so much that you feel smothered? Tell you or imply that you are the reason for her depression, lack of success, or unfulfilled life? Tell you or imply that she can't cope without you, and only your help will do? Use money or the promise of money to manipulate you? Threaten to make your life difficult if you don't do what she wants? Ignore or discount your feelings and wants? Yes answers are clear indications that your mother is crossing or has crossed the boundary that separates loving mothers from unloving ones. These behaviors are probably not new, and chances are they have been going on for most of your life. You'll see that clearly if you put a simple "did she" in front of each of the questions above, and think about what was going on when you were little. The next list will give you a sense of how your relationship with your mother has affected you. Do you wonder if your mother loves you and feel ashamed that she may not? Feel responsible for the happiness of everyone but yourself? Believe that your mother's needs, wants, and expectations of you are more important than your own? Believe that love is something you have to earn? Believe that no matter what you do for your mother, it won't be enough? Believe that you must protect her even from the knowledge that she's hurting you? Feel guilty and believe you're a bad person if you don't comply with the wishes of other people, especially your mother? Hide the details of your life and feelings from your mother because you know she'll find a way to use your truths against you. Find yourself constantly chasing approval. Feel scared, guilty, and small, no matter how much you accomplish. Wonder if there's something wrong with you that will keep you from being able to find a partner who loves you. Feel afraid to have children, if you want them, because they'll turn out messed up, like me. All these feelings and beliefs are legacies of the mother wound, and they too have their roots in childhood. But even if you answered yes to every one of these questions, please be assured that you're not doomed or irreparably damaged. There are many changes you can put into practice immediately to improve your life, your self-image, and your relationships. The women you'll meet in this book are very much like you. Throughout the pages that follow, you'll see how they courageously examine their pasts and use their new understanding of their mothers and themselves to make enormous positive changes in their lives. I'll guide you through the same healing journey that unfolds in our counseling sessions, giving you the tools to finally free yourself from the painful legacy of growing up with an unloving mother. How this book is organized. The chapters in the first half of the book will introduce you to the 5 common varieties of mothers who can't love. I'll take you into therapy sessions with daughters like Heather, and you'll see each type of mother's behavior through her daughter's eyes. You'll have a chance to listen as daughters describe the difficulties they face now with their mothers and how that affects the rest of their lives. You'll also see the coping mechanisms they use as girls to protect themselves from their mother's unloving behavior. And you'll see how those behaviors and beliefs have crystallized into some very painful, self-defeating patterns. You'll be able to look at behavior like your mother's in a context stripped of the explanations and rationalizations you've probably heard all your life. And you'll come to understand your mother much more clearly. I'm sure you'll see yourself more clearly as well. It's quite likely that you'll see elements of your own experiences reflected in more than one chapter. Many unloving mothers fall into more than one category, and daughters who have been deprived of healthy mothering, no matter what type, carry many of the same scars. In the second half of the book, we move from discovery to recovery. I'll guide you through the steps and strategies that will allow you to change your relationship with your mother and improve your life. We'll work together to move the understandings in your head into the emotional realm, where you'll be able to make deep shifts in the way you see both your mother and yourself. Then I will introduce you to the tools you can use to reclaim your confidence, your self-esteem, and your fragile sense of lovability. For those of you whose mothers are deceased, lucky you might wonder if there's any point to doing the work in the second half of the book. The answer is yes. Your mother is still very much alive in your head. You can still hear her criticisms and demeaning comments. Jeez, can't wait. You can still feel the sting of her abuse. The work I will show you will go a long way toward lessening that pain. What I can tell you from my own experience and that of thousands of other daughters, is that it's possible to change a belief you've carried so long that something in you shattered when you were young and can't be mended. I promise you that as we work together in this book, you will gain a wonderful sense of wholeness. In yourself and the world around you, you'll find paths to the self-respect, wisdom, and caring that you've craved for so long. Why don't I do the first chapter of part 1? It's called Identifying the Mother Wound. Chapter 1. The taboo of questioning your mother's love. Don't you dare say anything bad about your mother. We may think we live in very psychologically aware times, but we haven't yet managed to shake off our mythical version of motherhood. The myth that says a mother by definition is capable of love, protection, and kindness. The mother myth gives great cover to unloving mothers who far too often operate undisturbed while their husbands, other family members, and society deflect any criticism or scrutiny aimed at them. Most societies glorify mothers, as if the mere act of giving birth makes them inherently capable of nurturing. That's simply not true. There's no magic switch that turns on maternal instinct and ensures that a woman, especially a troubled one, will suddenly bond with her baby, know and respond to what that child needs, and give her the nurturing she craves. Of course, the Freudian tradition of mother bashing, blaming mothers for everything that goes wrong, is faulty. But it is also a fantasy to believe that the role of mother is automatically synonymous with healthy love. The widespread belief in this fantasy is so strong that if your mother was unloving and you try to tell the truth of what happened, how your mother really behaved toward you, you'll inevitably run into a wall of resistance from powerful external forces, including your mother herself, that pull together to defend her. In fact, dealings with unloving mothers are constricted by so many taboos, and attitudes about the mother wound are so charged that it's common to encounter skepticism, sharp criticism, and counterproductive advice. If you've attempted to chart a new course with your mother, you've already seen what can happen. You try to make peace with her and find yourself pulled back into a web of criticism and manipulation. Once more, you're the ungrateful one, the selfish one, the unforgiving one, the one who will always owe her no matter what she does. You seek advice from relatives and sometimes from friends who respond, "How can you talk that way about your mother? She gave you life. What's wrong with you?" You have the misfortune of consulting misguided therapists who urge you to forgive and forget and make peace with your mother, no matter how high the emotional cost to you. You try to get support from a priest, minister, or spiritual counselor, and you're met with responses like, "Honor thy mother." Do people say that? You won't heal until you forgive. Family is everything. You even try talking to your partner who counsels, "Don't let her get to you. That's just the way she is." And after all that, you're back to where you started, bewildered, alone, and even shamed by the attempt to face and overcome your history. You may start to wonder if you have the right to feel the way you do. Other people don't see what you see. Struggling with the pain and repercussions of having an unloving mother can be intensely lonely and isolating. People with reasonably healthy mothers have a tough time understanding that all mothers are not like theirs, and it's quite common for even a well-meaning friend or relative to discount an unloved daughter's pain or blame her for when she looks for sympathy. My client Valerie, a 32-year-old computer programmer, came to me hoping to overcome the shyness and anxiety that had made her feel stuck and discouraged about her work and social life. It was hard to break out of her shell, she said, especially because people just don't understand me. When I asked for an example, she described a recent incident. A month ago, I enrolled in an adult art class, something I've always wanted to do. The instructor, Terry, was very encouraging about my watercolors, and despite a 25-year difference in our ages, we became quite close. Terry told me she was going to put on an exhibit of student work, and I was thrilled when she told me she had selected 2 of my pieces. Suddenly, I burst into tears. When she asked me what was going on, I told her that I had a huge fight with my mother on the phone that morning, and I didn't want to invite her. She said she was eager to meet my mother, who's an interior designer, and also a frustrated artist, though I didn't mention that. Terry brought up my mom a couple of times, so against my better judgment, I sent her an email. So Mom comes to my exhibit and praises everyone else's work, and she's totally lukewarm about mine. But of course, she was her most charming and effusive to Terry. After she left, Terry said to me, "I would love to have a lovely mother like that. I would give anything if my mother were still alive. I hope you know how lucky you are." I said, "Well, what you see isn't always what you get. My mother can be very self-centered, critical, and competitive." It was as if Terry didn't hear a word I said. She just repeated, "You should thank your lucky stars you have a mother who cares enough about you to come see your work." Valerie felt frustrated and unheard by a woman she thought was her friend. And if the pain is deep for an adult like Valerie, imagine how worse it is for a young, dependent girl, or your own younger self, as you try to feel heard and understood. Colleen, a single 28-year-old manager for a supermarket chain, told me that for as long as she could remember, she had suffered from a chronic low-grade depression. She was on medication that had helped her considerably, but she had enough insight to see that there was a lot of unfinished business in her past that was contributing to her depressed feelings, and she wanted my help to sort through it. As I found out a little more about her, I asked her to tell me something about her childhood. "I had no one to talk to," she said. "It was no bed of roses. Nobody listened to me, and I just stuffed my sadness. If I tried to talk to my father about my mother, he would say, Just be nice to her. Once I got to stay overnight with my Aunt Gina. She asked me how things were at home. I felt pretty safe with her. She'd always been okay with me. So I told her, I think something's wrong with Mom. She's always screaming at me and telling me I'm not worth anything. Gina listened quietly and seemed to understand, but then she said, You have to try to keep her happy. She doesn't mean those things. She's very unhappy with your father, and if it wasn't for you, she would have left him a long time ago. You owe her. Don't be so sensitive. She sounded really upset with me. I felt even worse after I told her, and I thought, great, now she's mad at me too. I wish I never said anything. The great common denominator among women with unloving mothers is a longing for validation. To find someone who will say, yes, what you experienced really happened. Yes, your feelings are justified. I understand. Great pressure is brought on to bear on daughters to not tell about the verbal, emotional, and even physical cruelties of their past and present. As you can see, for children, the rules become clear early. Don't tell anyone. Don't even tell yourself. That's how you learn to bury, minimize, and mistrust your own truth. How maternal rejection is internalized. That impulse to make the best of what you have where your mother is concerned may seem positive, but it masks a whole system of fault lines that run below the surface of your life. Kind of emotional earthquake zone. Maintaining the grin and bear it status quo keeps the peace, but it's less a choice than a form of paralysis brought about by shame and fear. What keeps you in the dark is a neat bit of emotional alchemy and amnesia. All the getting a little panicky. Nothing to do with what I'm reading, I'm sure. All the external messages you've gotten whenever you've tried to tell the truth about your mother echo back at you from the inside as powerful emotions. You feel tremendous disloyalty for criticizing her by telling the truth. After all, she gave you life. You feel ashamed. All mothers love their children, and they must have a good reason if they don't. You doubt your perceptions and wonder if you're too sensitive or just feeling sorry for yourself. These thoughts and feelings are intense, and for many of us, they're so threatening and touch such a deep well of pain and insecurity that they spark what I can only describe as terror. It is terror of the consequences of allowing ourselves to experience what we'd feel if we admitted to ourselves that our mothers were unloving and of trying to change a relationship. These are the words I so often hear daughters use to explain why they couldn't possibly label their mothers, even the most abusive of them, as unloving. 1. I couldn't stand the guilt. 2. I couldn't bear the sadness. 3. I couldn't stand the loss. The frightened little child inside the adult says, if you tell the truth, it could mean you don't have a mother anymore. And when they hear the whisper of that inner child, even the most accomplished and sophisticated people forget that they're adults who no longer need close ties to their mothers to survive. Once you've persuaded yourself you couldn't stand the feelings that come with acting on your truth, there's just one recourse: rationalizations that distort both your self-image and your view of your mother. Listen, she really had it tough, you tell yourself. I've got to cut her some slack. Colleen struggled mightily to hold on to any shred of evidence that her mother wasn't that bad, and her rationalizations were all too familiar. In the words of Colleen, I don't want you to think I demonize my mom. I don't. I mean, she made sure we had food and a roof over our heads. I never went hungry. I had books for school, nice clothes, and to be totally honest, I was kind of a troublemaker when I was little. It's no wonder she got upset with me. Colleen was still hoping to somehow salvage something positive from a relationship with a mother who had given her enough to eat, but who starved her emotionally. Doing that, though, required her to pull out the self-blame that's so familiar and so oddly comforting to daughters of unloving mothers. Do you see the cycle at work here? The pain in your relationship with your mother keeps turning to fear, which becomes rationalization and self-blame. It's a closed loop that keeps you locked in and unable to change. Our intellects may know what's going on, but our emotions tell us a different story, and most of the time it's our emotions that we listen to. Daughters of unloving mothers are often able to say, "My mother is depressed. My mother is incredibly self-absorbed. My mother is driving me crazy. And even, my mother is an alcoholic. My mother was verbally abusive and still is. My mother is such a bitch." The words sound tough and knowing, but it's a kind of knowing that often stops far short of giving you any relief. Because until you disconnect fully and completely from the mother myth, you can't halt the emotional cycle that is programmed to explain everything in just one way. Whatever my mother did, it was all my fault. All your life, you've probably been trapped in the belief that you, not your mother, are flawed. This damaged self-image shaped your developing sense of yourself as an adult, which you carried into adulthood like a steamer trunk. And from that early collection of fears and misunderstandings about yourself, you continue to orchestrate many of the self-defeating behaviors of your life. Confronting the taboos. This book will give you a detailed portrait of unloving motherhood that will help you bury the mother myth once and for all. In the chapters that follow, you'll see a wide variety of mothers who, because of serious psychological or physiological impairment, are neither willing nor able to provide the kind of consistent love that plays such a large role in guiding a child toward emotional well-being. They cannot truly love. I want to emphasize that none of these mothers wakes up in the morning thinking, "How can I hurt my daughter today?" Much of their behavior is driven by forces outside their conscious awareness or emotions they're afraid of confronting. A crippling sense of insecurity, an unshakable feeling of deprivation, deep disappointment in their own lives. As they look for relief from their own fears and sadness, they use their daughters to shore up their feelings of power or agency or control. The hallmark of all these mothers is a lack of empathy, and their intense self-centeredness blinds them to the suffering they create. They rarely step out of themselves to see things from your point of view. All they know is that they want what they want and need what they need, and they find it difficult, if not impossible, to make the connection between their demons and the hurtful actions that come to define their relationship with you. Please don't look away when the mother's behavior you see in these pages seems painfully close to what you've experienced. It's important to recognize it as the opposite of love and to let that recognition in deeply and fully, even if you have to do it a little at a time. I know it may be difficult, and we can't repair the damage wrought by the mother myth without taking a clear-eyed look at what your mother did and the marks it left on your life. The mothers you'll see in this half of the book fall into 5 recognizable types. Nice. There are no firm boundaries among these categories, and an unloving mother may fall into several. You will come to know the workings of the severely narcissistic mother. Powerfully insecure and self-absorbed, she has an insatiable need for admiration and a grandiose sense of her own importance. She must be the center of attention and lunges for the spotlight anytime she feels it moving from herself to you. She may treat her daughter as a rival, undercutting her sense of confidence, attractiveness, and power as a woman. Criticism and competition flare any time this mother feels threatened, particularly when her adult daughter begins to thrive. The overly enmeshed mother smothers her daughter with demands for time and attention, erasing the boundaries between them and insisting on being the most important person in her daughter's life, no matter what the cost. Because she relies on her role as a mother to fill all her emotional needs, she can't foster her daughter's healthy independence. She commonly describes her daughter as her best friend, though she rarely empathizes when her daughter's needs and preferences don't line up with her own. The control freak feels powerless in many parts of her life and uses her daughter to fill that void, seeing her as a person whose role in life is to make her mother happy and do her bidding. These mothers make their needs, wants, and demands clearly known, and threaten severe consequences anytime their daughters try to honor a different agenda. They justify their actions by insisting that only they know the best course of action their daughters can take, and their constant criticism makes daughters believe it. Oh, we're nearing the end of the chapter thing. Hope you're doing good. Mothers who need mothering are overwhelmed. Often caught in the undertow of depression or addiction, they leave their daughters in the position of having to care for them, and often the rest of the family as well. Classic patterns of role reversal take hold as the daughter is thrust out of her own childhood to parent her childlike mother, all the while starved for the guidance and protection her mother is unable to give her. Mothers who neglect, betray, and batter. These mothers occupy the darkest end of the spectrum, icily unable to summon any warmth at all, leaving their daughters unprotected from abuse at the hands of other family members, or even physically abusing their daughters themselves. The damage they inflict is poisonous, and the scars their daughters bear are deep. We will see how all of these mothers chip away at the foundation of their daughters' lives, and through these examples, you will begin to understand how living with your own unloving mother taught you ways of being in the world that have impaired your ability to love, trust, and thrive. Repeating patterns. It's an old cliche that women tend to marry their fathers. Yikes. But the more eye-opening truth is that we often marry our mothers. Even more yikes. That is, in choosing partners and situations in adult life, we are frequently propelled by a strong unconscious need to repeat the familiar dramas that produce the mother wound. As you saw earlier in the checklists, problematic patterns of caretaking, people-pleasing, and insecurity often have their roots in this relationship. From an unloving mother, a girl develops high tolerance for mistreatment, and at the darkest end, a battered child may become a battered adult or an abusive mother herself. But whatever your mother's legacy, the links you make between past and present will give you the desire and the power to make lasting changes. And I'm going to stop there for the day. I feel wiped. So we got to page 23. I love to keep reading this book aloud like this, and maybe I will. Hey, like this video. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Let's talk mothers. Okay.